Some people might ask, well, how comes then in the fog of war with something like the Manhattan Project, and whether one thinks it was put to good use?
Well, let's examine that, okay? Because that's a great metaphor. Let's pick that apart. Okay, so the Manhattan Project, they gathered a group of scientists and they isolated them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And they gave them a project and all the capital they needed and a very clear objective.
Yes.
They said, this is the mission. We're going to give you all you want. We're going to stick you in the desert.
Yeah.
We're not going to let you talk to anybody else. You're going to go figure it out.
Yeah.
Okay? Nothing like that happened. There was no, we talk about Operation Warp Speed. I personally mentored the colonel who was assigned to project manage OWS for the Moderna vaccine, okay? Back when we were developing the Ebola vaccine, okay? And he came to me afterwards, later in this outbreak, and he seemed to want to unburden his heart. And he told me about some of the things that went on there. A lot of that was consensus decision making. It was in committee, okay? It was not rational drug development, stepwise analysis, the things that Mark's, who's here with us, is a pharmaceutical specialist, the world that he lives in and that I was trained to live in, where we work methodically according to protocols by these international standards, et cetera, all that got thrown out the door. And I can tell you the reason why the Moderna dose is what it is compared to Pfizer is because the committee split the difference. Some of them wanted to go for 300 mics and some wanted to go for 30 mics and went for 100 mics. And that is no way to do drug development.
Yeah,
but that's what happened all the way through.
Good science is not done by consensus. And I like to joke that no one of us is as dumb as all of us. And so when we go to this consensus, his great discovery early on, that was Eureka. That wasn't a consensus committee finding. It was him coming up with a great idea. All science.
There was no way that could have happened.
Don't you build on the sorry to interrupt, but don't you build on the shoulders of one another?
You do, absolutely. But most advances in science come in leaps and bounds from an accidental discovery. And it's cross-pollinating ideas in scientific areas, and you're looking and using that critical thinking skill. But if you're stuck in the elephant tail to trunk, trunk to tail in the circus, all walking in that same circle together, and you have a ringmaster just barking out directions, you are never going to break out of that circus.
So this is, so I'm sorry to pump the book, but this is why, this is the journey that's captured in this book, The Lies My Government Told Me and the Better Future Ahead, is what was this cascade of events? And as you work through the government's response and the kind of this emergent phenomena that included media and the Trusted News Initiative, all these various actors, pharma, et cetera. I mean, we now know Scott Gottlieb is directly in there tweaking what's going to be allowed to be spoken about on behalf of Pfizer, leveraging his former position at the FDA. I mean, if you want to see a closed circle, that's a pretty good one. But what is clear is that we had massive groupthink. This well-known phenomena that has bedeviled American foreign policy for decades, since mid-century at least, was clearly in action here. We had this small insular group of in people, the in crowd, that all knew each other. Here's a fun fact. Deborah Birx was Tony Fauci's postdoc. Know that? Did you know that Drew Weissman, Grieco and Weissman, the pseudouridine, was a Tony Fauci postdoc? Okay. Did you know that Bob Redfield was formerly of DOD, very tight with Deborah Birx because they come from the same places, okay, and was tight as a tick with Bob Gallo, who was Tony Fauci's major nemesis partner. I mean, it is a incredibly tight insular circle.
So when your family tree doesn't branch, you end up with problems. And
so what you're saying is because of that, there was a lack of willingness to question or challenge or break out of the mold.
In groupthink, there's a force that will lead these small groups to value internal consensus over the overall objectives, being tight and remaining tight with their own internal consensus is more important than achieving the mission. And it will override fundamental ethics. This is well documented. This is standard political science. It's been taught in textbooks for years.
Well, no, I hear that. Although, you could make some counterclaims to that. Like there are people that might say that at different junctures, people who had principles and committed to them would challenge things. I get the point that the idea of groupthink, everyone goes along with it. But here's the question that many people will be asking, I'm sure. So would you now, in hindsight, you've talked a bit about treatment, but also in terms of like the vaccination, right, the mRNA jab, would you see it as having served any purpose for any demographic at all, elderly with vulnerabilities, or at this point should it be paused, stopped?
So we came out with a clear, unequivocal statement about this in April 11th.
Yeah, and absolutely they need to be halted. The risk versus benefit is clear in the risk direction. The Cleveland Clinic just finished a study showing that.
How big was that?
51,000 patients, so significant, statistically significant. But it showed, look, the more jabs you get, the more you get COVID. And even Moderna's bivalent data showed that if you got the bivalents, you actually got COVID at a higher rate than the control group. The Wuhan spike that is still coded for in these shots, that spike and that variant went extinct a year and a half ago or more. The BA4, BA5 variants in the bivalents are essentially extinct as well. We have the BQ1, BQ11, the XBB 1.5, all these other variants, and that's what I was mentioning earlier. Coronaviruses always mutate ahead of our efforts.
Well, and if I can jump in on this, okay, this was foreseen.
Yes, they knew.
The literature on immune imprinting, or original antigenic sin, basically came out in the first quarter of last year. And it was completely ignored by the CDC and by the FDA. I didn't ignore it. I was first pinged about it by a New York Times reporter. I wrote a big essay about it, and then I testified about the implications of those data for the boosters that were being designed in sworn testimony in the Texas State Senate. You can go find it, you can look it up, it's there. And I said, these are designed, to my eye, as the optimal way to further enhance this immune imprinting problem. And it will cause people to be more susceptible to infection and disease because of this problem that has long plagued influenza vaccine development. I mean, this is not new stuff. This has been around for decades. Okay, this is not some great mental leap that I or others made. It was backed by solid data from some of the top laboratories in the world.
Can you just explain what you mean by that? So you mean with influenza, because isn't it the case that there is always mutations? And
if you repeatedly vaccinate, particularly to a limited set of antigens, you will cause your immune system to be trained on those antigens to such an extent that it will default to responding to the old antigens when it's presented with something that's similar but different.
Yeah.
It's like putting blinders on a horse. Now your body, your horse can only see that road, but it can't see these other potentially new proteins.
And so it will mount an immune response as if it's seeing the old pathogen.
Yes.
Okay? And this has been a chronic problem. This, if you notice, influenza vaccine efficacy, this is heresy, okay? They may cut this, or you'll be deplatformed from YouTube. The influenza vaccine effectiveness in the field has dropped from about 50 to about 20% now.
And this last year it was 16%.
Okay? And that we have known for a long time that immune imprinting or original antigenic sin is a major driver of this. And now what's happened, because we now have this massive trove of data with this outbreak, and there's been a bit of an advance in the understanding of immune imprinting, because now we know it's not just this general phenomena that we believed we understood, but now we have data showing there's different classes of antibodies. And with
I was hoping he would bring
with
this
this
up. This is very
vaccinate,
important.
vaccinate, vaccinate, We're actually driving people from the categories of antibodies that are known to protect against infectious disease and viruses towards a different category of antibody, Ig4, that is more associated with allergic responses and less effective at fighting off infectious disease. And this gets to, I spoke about this early on in talking to parents. Anybody, if you have a child, and your child develops an allergy against pollen,
Peanuts, for example, or
peanuts or grass pollen or whatever. Okay, you go to an allergist or rheumatologist and you say, doctor, my son has a peanut allergy. What am I going to do about it? I don't want him to die. And he says, well, here's an EpiPen. I'll take $200. And he says, I'm going to give him a bunch of shots. Okay, he's going to hypervaccinate him.
A little at a time.
Yeah.
A little at a time.
And what that does is it drives tolerance to that peanut. You know this. You've experienced it. The parents that are watching this know this, okay? And by this practice of vax, you're creating that same kind of process immunologically. And why are they doing it? That's the next question.
Can you just clarify though, but what the peanut analogy, you give them a little bit of that, so they build up their tolerance to having a reaction.
Yeah, so
right?
very simply, a little protein, a little at a time for the allergy shot. So you calm the immune system down to where it's just eventually not going to react to peanuts. Now for an allergen, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
But to a pathogen, that's a horrible idea.
Right.
Because you don't want to be completely tolerant to where your immune system doesn't recognize an infectious agent.
But I think the key
thing here is
as well with
all these variables.
Discussion about antibiotics as well, right? The public knows this in this discussion.
It is actually, that is a good metaphor, the overuse of antibiotics in a big picture sense, 40,000 foot looking down. The overuse of antibiotics that drives the development of antibiotic resistant bugs in livestock and other sources is a reasonable metaphor, sort of. It's a little sketchy at the edges, but it's a good way to kind of think about it. I early on, I used to always say, if you give a 3-year-old a hammer, everything becomes a nail. And that's kind of the way it is with
Am I the 3-year-old in this?
No, I would argue that Deborah Birx was the 3-year-old.
Yes. We lost common sense and common science.
Right.
Both. That was the problem.